So let us start with our basic German learning module. So the first section that we will be covering today is alphabets. Alphabets in Deutsch, in German, are called as Buchstaben. Buchstaben. Okay, so I'll just repeat the pronunciations once, okay, with the phonics. So we start with A, B, C, D. A, F, G. H, I, J. If you look at the sound of J, here we have a sound of here to it. So it is pronounced as yacht. K, L, M, N. O, P, Q, R, S. T, U, V, W. X, Y, Z. I'll repeat it once more. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Okay. Now what we see here is another letter which looks like a beta. So in addition to our A to Z, we have one more letter here in Deutsch. This letter is called as SZ or sometimes scharfes S, which means a very sharp S. So the pronunciation of this S is almost like a hissing sound, like the sound of S, okay, an extended sound of S. So apart from your A to Z, this is one more letter that we need to remember and use in German. Now after the alphabets, we have some more vowels in Deutsch. Apart from A, E, I, O, U, there is something that is called as umlaut. So you may have noticed that sometimes there are two dots which are put on A, O and U. Okay, these are called as umlauts. So those two dots are called as umlauts. What they indicate is they indicate a change of pronunciation, what we in German call as Ausspracheveränderung oder Veränderung eines Vokales. So we have vocals, pronunciations. When you put two dots on A, O and U, the pronunciation changes a little bit. So let's take a look at the pronunciations. So when there are two dots on A, it is called as A umlaut. When there are two dots on O, it is called as O umlaut. And when there are two dots on U, it is called as U umlaut. Now the pronunciations of these umlauts can be a little bit tricky. I'll just repeat it once. A umlaut is pronounced as A. A umlaut is pronounced as A. O umlaut is pronounced as Ö. O umlaut is pronounced as Ö. And U umlaut is pronounced as Ü. Okay, I'll repeat the pronunciations once more. E, Ö, and Ü. Okay, it is best to learn these umlauts when we learn words. So that means it is simpler to learn umlauts when you learn it with a word. So when we go to examples further, we will look at the pronunciations of umlauts specifically so that we can learn those sounds better. The topic that we'll be looking at now is Zahlen, which are numbers. So we will be learning the basic numbers from 1 to 100. Okay, so let us start. So as you can see, we have numbers 1 to 20 written here. We will first do the numbers 1 to 20 and then proceed with the further numbers. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So see the umlaut here, O umlaut, so the sound is 12. Similarly, here the sound is 5. So these are the umlauts that we have, which changes the pronunciation a little bit. So this becomes 5 with U, and this becomes 12 with U. So we'll repeat from here once. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, so I'll repeat it once more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So we have the end numbers of each series written here. So let's take a look at them first. We have 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 or 100. So you can use either of the one, like we say 100 or 100. You could use it as 100 or 100. Okay, so these are the ends of the series. Now what remains is the numbers which fall in between. That is the numbers from 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50 to 60 and so on. So the good thing here is these numbers follow a very specific pattern. Once you all are aware of the pattern, there is no need to mug up all the numbers or by heart all the numbers. So all you need to do is understand this pattern. So let's take a look at that pattern. So for the sake of example, let's take the number 21. So till 20, we have 20. Now let's take a look at number 21. Now if you look at the 2-digit numbers that we have in German, these numbers follow a pattern. That is, these numbers go from right to left. That is, they go from the units to tens. So the number here that we have is 1. Now, one thing to observe here is when we have the number 0, 1, that is 1, as we saw previously. But the moment we start using 1 in the units place, say 21, 31, 41 and so on, the number becomes 1. So you have 1 and the tens place here is 20. So Your number goes like this: 21, that is 1 and 20. You combined this with und, which is and. So your number becomes 21. So all you need to know is you need to know the numbers in the units place from 1 to 9. And then you need to know the numbers which end each series, like 20, 30, 40, 50. And you can make all the 2-digit numbers on your own. There is no need to by heart this. So let's take a few more examples. Now, if you look at these numbers, these are out of the series of 20 to 30. And yet we will be able to make these numbers in that same pattern. So first what you do is you mark out the units place. So in this case, my units place is dry. In this case, the units place is fumes. The next thing you need to do is you need to look at what the tens place is. So you need to look at the n number of that series, which is 30, that is 30, and 40, which is 40. So you combine this number with 30. You combine this number with 40, and at the end, just put und here, which is and you get your 2-digit number. So this becomes 33. This becomes 45. So all the 2-digit numbers can be made with this pattern. It's just that the tens place of every number goes on changing. So I will repeat it once. So we have 21. Here we have 33. So you have 30 and you have this 3. You have 45. So if you look at it, the number goes backwards. Now a thing to note here is whenever you have digits in 2-digit numbers which are similar. So for example, I have similar digit numbers. Let's say 62 and 26. Now, the digits that both of these numbers have are the same. The thing to concentrate is the place. So, in the units place here, we have 2. In the units place here, we have 6. So, this number will start with 2. This number will start with 6. And then you move this number backward towards its tens place. You will find that here you have 6 in the tens place, which makes it 60. Here you have 2 in the tens place. Here you have 2 in the tens place, which makes it 20, that is 20. So you combine these numbers, each of it. You combine these numbers, each of it, first with und. So 6 und and 2 und. 2 und and 6 und, and then you take the respective tens place. So this becomes 2 und 60, which is your 62. Okay, so 2 und 60, and this becomes 6 und 20. So if you follow this pattern of making numbers, your 1 to 100, all the numbers can be made with a similar pattern. Now in day-to-day German, there are certain common greetings which are used all along. So when you meet somebody, you would offer to wish the person first. So the first wish that we have here is Guten Morgen. Guten Morgen is a Begrüßung, that is, it is a greeting. So singular is greeting, plural is greetings. Okay, so singular is Begrüßung, plural is Begrüßungen. That's, as you can see, it's written here. So the first and the most basic greeting we start with is Guten Morgen, which means good morning. So when you meet somebody in the morning, the way to open the conversation is by saying Guten Morgen. Now, if you observe the pronunciation of air, the pronunciation of air in Deutsch is really subtle. So the pronunciation is Guten Morgen. I'll repeat it once more. Guten Morgen. The next wish or the next greeting that we have is Guten Tag, which is good day. Now, usually when we use good day in English, it's more like a closing conversation. That is, I end a conversation by saying good day. In German, however, Guten Tag or good day is an opening conversation. That is, when I meet you in a time after the morning, we will use the wish Guten Tag. Remember one thing, there is no concept of wishing good afternoon in German. So if it is not morning, the wish that you have is Guten Tag. The third wish that we go on to is Guten Abend. Abend means evening. So when you are wishing somebody a good evening, you say Guten Abend. I'll repeat the three pronunciations once more. Guten Morgen, Guten Tag, Guten Abend. After Guten Morgen, Guten Tag and Guten Abend comes Gute Nacht, that is good night. So good night, as we all know, is a closing wish. When you're wishing somebody a good night, you use Gute Nacht. Look at the pronunciation once more. It is Gute Nacht. And after Gute Nacht, we have one more wish, which is Guten Appetit. Guten Appetit is used when you're wishing somebody a very nice or a very pleasant meal, something like Bon Appetit. So the Bon Appetit in Deutsch, in German, is Guten Appetit. So these are the basic wishes that we have as opening and closing of conversations. So now we will be looking at the days in German. Okay, so days of the week in German are called as Tage. Okay, I'll repeat it, Tage. Okay, so we have 7 days of the week, as you all can see. We start with Montag, which is Monday, Dienstag, which is Tuesday, Mittwoch, which is Wednesday, Donnerstag, which is Thursday, Freitag, which is Friday, Samstag, which is Saturday, and Sonntag, which is Sunday. I'll first repeat it. Montag, Dienstag, Mittwoch, Donnerstag, Freitag, Samstag, Sonntag. Now let's take a look at the pronunciations of each of these. So first let's start with Montag. If you can see, the spelling has O and single N. So the pronunciation here is short. It is Montag. The next peculiar pronunciation that we must observe is the pronunciation of Mittwoch. So if you see the sound here, O-C-H, that is O-C-H, becomes K. So the sound here is Mittwoch. Next, we move on to Donnerstag. Now here, we have O-N double N. So the pronunciation is slightly stretched out. Okay, so the pronunciation is Donnerstag. Okay, if you compare it with Montag, which is O-N single N, the pronunciation is Montag, But if you look at the pronunciation of Donnerstag, it is a little stretched. So that is Donnerstag. Then the next pronunciation that we take a look at is the pronunciation of SA and SO, which is SA und SO as in Samstag and Sonntag. So Samstag, if you notice, the pronunciation of SA becomes Z. So it is Samstag. And similarly, the pronunciation of SO becomes ZO, which is Sonntag. So it is not S, it is Z. Okay. Another pronunciation here in Sonntag is again that extended O and double N. So like Donnerstag, the pronunciation of Sonntag is also a little bit stretched. Okay. So Donnerstag, Sonntag. Okay. So we'll do one final repetition of all the days. Montag, Dienstag, Mittwoch, Donnerstag, Freitag, Samstag, Sonntag. Now, after having learned the days of the week in German, let's come to the months. Months are called as Monate. I'll repeat it once more. Monate. Okay. So, as you can see, we have all the 12 months listed here. So, we start with Januar, which is January. Februar, which is February. März, which is March. April, which is April. Mai, that is May. Juni, that is June. Juli, that is July. August, which is August. September, which is September. October, which is October. November, which is November. Und Dezember, which is December. I'll repeat it. Januar, Februar, März. Now, if you take a look at März, we have the umlaut here. So, the sound of A, which makes it März. April, Mai, Juni. Since J in Deutsch is J, the sound of both these months will have here. Also, the sound of Januar. So, Januar, Juni, Juli. August, September, October, November, and December. In this video, we will be continuing with the keywords that we use in German conversations. So, the first thing that we will start with is hello. So, hallo is what we say in German. So, the conversation starts with hallo. Now, usually with globalization, the basic terms that we use in other languages are also okay, as in you can say hi or you can say hey, which also works. But especially for formal conversations, we use hallo. The next keyword that we have here is thank you, which comes to danke or vielen Dank. So there are two ways in which you can say thank you. One is by saying danke, other is by saying vielen Dank. After thank you comes the response, which is you're welcome. So in German, when you are trying to say you're welcome, we use the word bitte. So danke, bitte. That comes in combination as thank you and welcome. Now you see the word bitte here. This word can also be used as please. That is when you are making a request. Let's just say I want somebody to get me a glass of water. Of course, I want to be polite about it. So I use the term bitter at the beginning or at the end of my request. The next word that we see here is the word Entschuldigung, which counts for sorry or excuse me, depending on the context. You will find a lot of words where one word can have two meanings, but the meanings do change depending on the context. So the word that we see here, Entschuldigung, this word has two meanings, sorry or excuse me. Also, the word is pretty long, so let's break down the pronunciation of it. So we have ent, that is the first syllable. We have shul, which is the second syllable. And then we have digung, which is the third syllable. So if you have a problem with pronunciation, you can just break down the syllables ent, shul, digung, and then just repeat them faster, like Entschuldigung. Okay, I'll repeat this once more. Entschuldigung, which stands for sorry or excuse me. We have another way in which we can say sorry, and which is a phrase, es tut mir leid. This is slightly used for deeper apologies when you really want to say that you are sorry for something and apologizing. Es tut mir leid. In a regular context, it doesn't make a difference. You can either use Entschuldigung or es tut mir leid. So just repeat the words that we see here once. Hallo, danke, vielen Dank, bitte, Entschuldigung, es tut mir leid. Now we come to concluding the conversation. So your conversations are always concluded by a goodbye. So there are multiple ways in which you can say goodbye. So the first way in which you can say goodbye is auf Wiedersehen. Now if you break down the meaning of this word, the word sehen meaning to see. So it implies that you're telling somebody, yes, I will see you again. So the conversation ends with auf Wiedersehen, which equates to a goodbye, but mostly means, yes, I would see you again. Now, since the word sehen means to see, we cannot use this as a goodbye when we are on audio conversations or telephonic conversations. So for that, we have another word. This word is auf Wiederhören. Okay, first thing to mark here is the pronunciation of O umlaut that we have learned, which is Ö. So the word becomes auf Wiederhören, which means I will hear you again in a way. So when you cannot see the person, let's just say we are on a video call, okay, when we see the person, we can say auf Wiedersehen. But let's just say we are on an audio call or on a telephonic call where we can't see the person. So when we hang up, we can just say auf Wiederhören. Then another way of going about saying goodbye is either saying tschüss or saying ciao. So tschüss and ciao are slightly informal. Let's say amongst friends or with family, you can use these words. Ciao more so is like a slang. So this is something which is very popular in Germany. People end conversations mostly with ciao. Okay. Again, the one thing to mark here is the U umlaut, which is the sound of U. So the pronunciation is tschüss. So tschüss or ciao. You can use either one. In addition to this, there are some more terms which you can add to end your conversation, which could either be used independently or they can complement your auf Wiedersehen, your tschüss, or your auf Wiederhören. So normally when we end a conversation, we also say when will you see the person next. So I could say, yeah, bye, I'll see you soon. I can say bye, I'll see you later. So the next two words that we have explain our see you soon and our see you later. So we have bis bald. Bis bald, which is see you soon. So bald means soon in German. So when you want to say that yes, I will see you soon, I can use bis bald. If I want to say yeah, I will see you later, in that case, I can use bis später. So bis bald is see you soon. Bis später is see you later. Okay, so let's repeat these once more. Auf Wiedersehen. Auf Wiederhören. Tschüss. Ciao. Bis bald. And bis später. Now let's move on to some basic conversations. So one thing we need to understand about German conversations is that your conversations can be divided into two parts. One, your conversation is informal. Second, your conversation can be formal. Now, depending on whom we talk to. So let's just say that we are talking to friends. Of course, the relationship is very casual. So we can have a very informal conversation with our friends. So I have an example here for informal conversations. So we start with Hallo. Hallo Paul. Guten Morgen. You open a conversation with a basic wish. Then there is a response which comes, Hallo Sandra. Wie geht's? So wie geht's is an informal way of saying how are you. So when we apply the formal and the informal, it applies to such basic levels as well. As simple as a how are you, that also needs to be formal or informal. So wie geht's is an informal way of saying how are you. The response to that can be Es geht mir gut, danke, which means I am doing very well, thank you. You always want to say a thank you because you don't want to sound rude. And then, of course, you can ask the other person the same question. So if somebody asks me how I am doing, to be polite, I will of course ask them how they are doing. So again, we use the same question, wie geht es dir? The response comes the same, es geht mir gut or auch gut, as you can see here, followed by a danke. Now, normally when we are in informal conversation, there is not always a need to make full sentences. For example, when we say an es geht mir gut, it is a complete sentence. But that's not always required if I'm sitting in a restaurant or I'm sitting in a cafe with my friends. So I can simply say auch gut, as we see here, which means, yeah, I'm doing well as well, or also fine, which shortens the conversation in a way. So the natural responses sometimes are based on the situation you are in. So where you feel like, yeah, this response works, I can just say gut and be okay with it, we can definitely use that response. There is no need to use full sentences, especially in informal conversations where the flow of the conversation matters more. Now, after this, we go on to formal conversations. Now, what can be our formal scenarios? So, formal scenarios can be, let's just say we are in an office space, we are in an interview, we are in an exam, we are in a university with a teacher. So, your relationship with these people is usually formal, which means not very strict, but it just means that you ought to show some kind of respect to the other person and have some kind of a boundary. So when we talk to people with whom we are formally related, our conversations tend to change a little bit. Although we ask them the same things, the way we ask, it's going to be different. So let's take a look. So we have a conversation here between two people who are working in an office. So you start with, Hallo Frau Schneider, guten Tag. So whenever you are addressing a person formally, we usually use the term Frau for women, which is like saying Miss. So when I say Frau Graf, as we can see here, Frau Graf means Miss Graf. You open the conversation by saying, Hallo Frau Graf, guten Tag. As a response, you get Hallo Herr Schneider, guten Tag. So when you are referring to a man, you use the term Herr. So Herr Schneider stands for Mr. Schneider. So we'll repeat this part. Hallo Frau Graf, guten Tag. Hallo Herr Schneider, guten Tag. So you're wishing a good day. Now the next question that we have is a how are you, but this how are you is formal. So, wie geht es Ihnen? This is the question. Wie geht es Ihnen, which is a formal way of asking somebody how they are doing. So, as we saw earlier, wie geht's is informal. Wie geht's is informal, but wie geht es Ihnen becomes your formal question. Wie geht es Ihnen? The response to it, as you can see, remains the same. Es geht mir gut, danke. The reason for that being, when we talk of formal and informal, the address is formal and informal. The person responding, it doesn't matter if they are addressed formally or informally, they will basically give a response in the same manner. So, the response remains the same, es geht mir gut, danke, and it is followed by the same thing, und Ihnen. That is, we ask the other person that same question, und Ihnen. So, und Ihnen, the response to that means, es geht mir auch gut. So, the auch here means also, and you of course want to end the conversation with a thank you. So these are the two examples of formal and informal conversations. But this goes for, in general, all the conversations that we have. That is, you can have a conversation formally as well as informally, depending on the situation you are in. In this segment, let's take a look at the German nouns. Okay. So the concept for today that we have is called as their article. So, article is something that denotes the gender of a noun. So, in Deutsch, we have three kinds of genders which are assigned to our nouns. We have masculine, which is masculine nouns. We have feminine, which are feminine nouns. We have neutral, which are neutral nouns. And finally, we have the plural form of nouns. Okay, so let us start with the masculine nouns first. So the article that denotes the masculine noun is their. Okay. So nouns in general are divided as masculine, feminine and neutral. When you are talking of masculine nouns, the article here is their. Now when we talk of nouns representing people, it is slightly easier to understand the gender of the noun. So say for example, I talk about the noun father, or I talk about the noun husband, or I talk about the noun brother. It is very easy to understand that these nouns are masculine, as father is always associated with masculine, or husband or brother is always associated with the masculine. So when it comes to people, there is not much of confusion when it comes to Deutsch nouns also. So the example that we can see here is der Mann. So there is the gender and Mann is the noun. So as you can see, Mann is a man. So when I am using the noun, I must have the gender with it. So that is why articles and nouns go hand in hand. You do not use articles without the noun, and you do not use nouns without the article. They are always used together. So der Mann. But if you look at the other noun that we have a cake here which is called as der Kuchen. So a masculine noun, der Kuchen. What we are usually used to is that non-living nouns might not be masculine, is what we think of. But when it comes to this language, that is not the case. You will have masculine nouns which are associated with people as well as things. And the same goes for feminine nouns and neutral nouns. That is, you can have feminine nouns which are also associated with people and things. And you have neutral nouns which are also associated with people and things. So how do we remember this is a question. So the first tip for that is a lot of practice. We always learn nouns together with the genders. So how do we usually learn nouns is that we need to know what the noun means. So once you have found out the meaning of the noun, also try to remember the gender of the noun along with it. For example, we will always say their man and not just man. We will always say their Kuchen and not just Kuchen. This applies when you are making questions or you're making statements. It doesn't matter. Whenever you use the nouns, make sure you use the articles, that is, the gender of the noun along with it. So our masculine gender is there. The nouns we have here are their man and their Kuchen. Now let's look at the feminine nomen. This is the female nouns or the feminine nouns. Okay. Now here we have die Frau. So Frau means a woman, a lady. The article for that is die Frau. But you see, on the other hand, we also have a noun, die Flasche. So the Flasche means a bottle. So this noun is also a feminine noun which has the article die. So you have der Mann, der Kuchen, die Frau, die Flasche. After this, we go to the neutral nomen, that is nouns which are neutral. Now again, just because they are neutral nouns doesn't mean they're only applicable for non-living things. We also have nouns which represent human beings as in people, and they still can be neutral nouns. So this gender is basically for that noun. Okay. So das Kind. So when we talk of a child, regardless what the gender of the child is, when the child is referred to as a child, the gender or the article here becomes das Kind. And similarly, we have one more example here, das Auto, which means a car. But the gender here is das Kind, das Auto. Both of these nouns are neutral. Like I said earlier, it just works best when we learn nouns, we learn them with the genders so that we are aware of what the gender of the noun is when you are using them in our communication. So masculine der, feminine die, neutral das. Now these are the singular forms of the nouns. Once we come to the plural form of the noun, we will see that there is a change in article. Now this article is also die. Now there can be a confusion as to how do we identify which noun is feminine and which noun is plural. So most of the time the word for the plural noun is going to be different. So like we have here die Kinder. So when we talk of one child, it is das Kind. But when we talk of many children, it is die Kinder. So the plural noun is going to be different from that of the singular noun. And the article for all the nouns in plural is going to be die. What it means is, it doesn't matter what the singular gender of the noun is. Your noun can be masculine der in singular. It can be feminine die in singular. Or it could be neutral das in singular. But when we are looking at the plural form of any of the noun, it is going to be die. So collectively, when you look at articles, you have 4 articles, der, die, das und die. So here we have die Kinder, die Coolies. So when I talk of a bunch of pens together, the article here becomes die and die Coolies. So remember, articles are a very important part of communication, and we need to know what the gender of the noun is going to be. So make sure you focus on the genders of the nouns as much as you do on learning the meanings of the nouns. So now let's take a look at some more nouns, okay, along with their articles. Now we will be covering the seasons in Germany, which are called as die Jahreszeiten. Okay, so since it is a plural noun, the article here is die. Die Jahreszeiten are the seasons. So we have 4 major seasons in Germany. We start with der Sommer, which is summer. So summer in Germany is from the months of Juni, Juli and August. That is 3 months of summer: June, July and August. So the noun here is der Sommer. Okay, remember to not stress on the R too much at the end. Der Sommer, and which is from Juni to August. That is from June to August. The next season that comes after summer is fall, which is called as der Herbst, okay, which ranges from September to November. So September, October and November is Herbst. So der Sommer, der Herbst. After Herbst, that is after fall, the season we have is winter. So the noun for winter remains winter, but we have the article which we need to add. That is der Winter. Okay, again, remember to not stress on the R too much at the end. It is der Winter, and your winter in Germany ranges from December, Januar and February. That is from December to February. And the final season which comes after the winter is spring. So spring in Deutsch is called as der Frühling. Mark the sound of O umlaut here. That is, the sound is Ü. So the pronunciation becomes Frühling. Okay, I'll repeat it. Frühling. So Frühling or our spring is from März, April, May. That is, your Frühling or your spring is from March to May. So we'll repeat all the seasons once. So if you look at it as a whole, you will notice that all the seasons have a masculine article, and the word is die Jahreszeiten, which is a plural noun. So der Sommer, der Herbst, der Winter, and lastly der Frühling. So these are the seasons that we have in Germany. In this next segment, we will be focusing on personal pronouns in German, or as we can just call it, pronouns. Okay? A lot of times when we converse, the major confusion is how do we address the person we are talking to, and how do we understand what is our conversation about. So it helps a great deal once we are able to understand the pronouns that we can use when we are making statements or framing questions. So you have 3 kinds of pronouns in general. There is a first person, there is a second person, and there is a third person. Okay? These 3 persons can be divided into singular pronouns and plural pronouns. Now let's take a look at the first person. So in German, your first person is always ich. Now there is a way to remember this in a little simpler manner, which is a finger pointing towards yourself. So if you can see this is your ich. Whenever you are giving information which is relating to yourself, and when you are addressing your own self, which is the I, this I is going to be ich. So the first person singular is ich. So anytime I say something I am doing, let's say I am watching a movie, I could be reading a book, I could be talking in Deutsch or learning German. Okay, so that I is your first person. So the first person that we have is ich. Okay, and ish is always singular. So when I am alone and I am talking about my own self, this action is your ish. Ish is your first person pronoun, singular. Okay. Now after ish comes your second person. That is the person you are addressing. Okay. The person that I am talking to, that becomes my second person. So the conversation with the second person is always direct. Okay. The conversation with the second person is always direct. So the finger pointing at the person in front of you, that is how you remember your second person. So your second person can either be do or ze. Now earlier we have spoken about formal conversations and informal conversations. So when I address a second person informally, let's just say I am the first person, I'm sitting in a coffee shop and I am talking to a friend of mine. Now this conversation that we have is a direct conversation, which means I address myself as the first person and I address the person in front of me as a second person. Now, since this person sitting in the coffee shop with me is a friend of mine, my relationship with this person is pretty informal. So, the way I address my second person, informal, is that do. So, this is ish and this is do. So, informal second person is called as do. Now, the same second person can also be a formal second person. Let's think of a scenario. Let's just say I am sitting at work and I am talking to my boss. In the same setup, in the same conversation, it's just that my rapport with this person is slightly different. I can't talk to him the way I talk to my friend. So I am the first person. This person sitting in front of me is the second person. But I need to remember, oh, this is my boss. So when I address my second person formally, I address my second person formally as ze. So informal is do, formal is ze. If you also notice, the S to this ze is capital. That's how you understand that it is formal and that's how you write it. So the formal ze that you have marks respect towards the second person, as in just showing a distance that yes, I need to address the second person formally. So first person is ish, your second person is do or ze. Remember, you always talk to a second person. So this conversation becomes a direct conversation. So after the second person, we now move on to the third person. Your third person can be er, which is masculine, ze, which is feminine, and s, which is neutral. So when we talk about a third person, the conversation is usually indirect. What this means is, I am never really talking to the third person. So let's just say I am having a conversation with my second person. My third person is usually not in the picture. We happen to discuss about this third person. Now, when we say third person, it could mean a person or a thing. The important thing to focus here is the gender of that noun that I am referring to, hence the pronouns er, ze and s. So let's say I am talking about a boy named Paul. Paul will be er. If I'm talking about a girl named Paula, Paula will be ze. And if I'm talking about a small baby, which is thus baby, it will be s. So your third person pronouns basically become er, ze and s. Remember that they are indirect. That is, you never talk to a third person. You always talk about a third person. So when referring to third persons, it is important to know the individual gender of the noun and then use the correct pronoun accordingly. So what we have seen so far is we have seen the nouns in singular, which is first person ish, second person do or ze, depending on if it is formal or informal, and third person er, ze or s. So these are our singular pronouns. Now when we converse, it is not always possible that our conversations are one-on-one. I could be talking to more than one person at a time, or when I mention about my own self, I might not necessarily be doing something individually. So let's take an example. I address myself as ish when I am doing something alone. Okay, so let's just say I'm reading a book, or I am traveling, or I am learning a language, for example. When I do it by myself and I am addressing only myself, I am ish. But let's say I am not doing a particular activity alone. Let's just say I am doing it together with my family, like travel. So if I am traveling alone, I will address myself as ish. But let's say I'm traveling with my family, then your ish, that is your first person, is not alone. So when you talk of a first person collectively, or let's just say when there is somebody else with your first person, we address that first person as we are. As you can see, we are is a group of people who are doing something together, which is your first person plural. So your first person plural becomes we are. So I do something alone, that is ish. But we do something together collectively, it is we are. So singular, your first person is ish. Plural, your first person is we are. After the first person plural, we go to second person plural. Now, connecting with what I said earlier, it is not always possible to just have a conversation one-on-one. So let's say I'm sitting in a coffee shop, I'm talking to one friend. At that point, I will call that friend as do, because informal conversation. My relationship with a friend is informal, so I will address the person as do. But let's say at this time, I have three friends sitting in front of me. It's not like I'm only talking to one at that time. I'm talking to all the three together. The situation, the relationship with these people still remain informal. So, when I address a second person informally, I address the second person as ear. So, if you see here, this is second person ear. So, when I am talking to somebody or addressing somebody as a second person, more than one, the address is going to be with the pronoun ear. But your conversations with a second person can also be formal conversations. So it's not like I'm always having to talk to one boss at a time. There can be a situation where I am talking to three bosses at a time. Now the good thing is with the second person formal, the pronoun doesn't change. So like we saw, you talking to one person and treating them with respect, showing that distance, we call them as ze. When you talk to more than one person, you still refer to them as ze. What this means is, I could be talking to one boss, it is still ze with the S capital. I could be talking to two bosses and that S is still capital. So when my second person is formal, the pronoun remains ze regardless of if it is singular or plural. Now finally, we come to the third person in plural. Okay. So when we have a conversation indirectly about someone or something, it's not like we are always referring to one man, one woman, one kid. No. We can sometimes collectively refer to nouns in terms of a third person, and therefore we need an appropriate pronoun when my third person becomes plural. So my third person plural is also ze with the S small. The difference here is I am referring to more than one person at a time indirectly. So how to identify the difference between a ze feminine and a ze plural becomes the question. So here always check who does that Z stand for. If that Z stands for one feminine noun, okay, let's say a girl, in that case, it is third person feminine singular because we are talking about one girl. But let's just say we are talking about a group of kids. Here, it doesn't matter what the singular pronoun is. What matters is that they are referred together as one, but they are referred indirectly. Okay. When you refer to a third person indirectly, and this third person is more than one, collectively it is addressed as Z plural. So, in general, you have three pronomen: first person, second person, and the third person. They can be divided into singular and plural. Not to forget that the second person is going to be formal and informal as well. So when it comes to formal and informal is only applied when you make an address, that is towards the second person. For the first person and for the third person, there is no formal and informal that is required. So these are the pronouns that we use when we are making questions or when we are making statements in a way that we want to address the conversation correctly, address the person we are referring to, or address the thing we are referring to collectively. So I'll repeat all the pronouns once more. First person ish, second person formal is Z with the S capital, informal is do, third person masculine is er, feminine is Z, neutral is S. First person plural is ish plus somebody with that ish, as in the form of a collective group, that is we're. Your second person, when you are talking to more than one people, informally becomes ear, formally remains Z with the S capital, and your third person becomes Z plural with the S small, but this Z addresses a group of people or a group of things indirectly as a third person. Now, after having learned a few basics of the German language, let's move a step ahead and come to the grammar. Okay, so we will be learning some basic concepts of grammar which will make it easier for you all to communicate in terms of questions or statements. So as you can see, the first topic that we are starting with is verb conjugation. So if you look at this word conjugation, in simple terms, conjugation means nothing but an adjustment. So an adjustment of the verb. Now, as we know, no matter which language we talk about, verbs are the most important parts of communication sentence construction. That is, without the verb, there is no possible communication. German is no different in that regard. So, the first step to having a good communication is to get a firm hold on your verbs. What we'll be learning today is the verb conjugation, which means adjustments of verbs according to the sentence. Okay, so let's take a look at an example. Now, verbs are divided into two categories. The first category is regelmäßig, or as we call it, regelmäßige Verben, which are your regular verbs. The second category are unregelmäßig or irregular verbs, which we will be seeing a little bit later. So let us start with regelmäßige Verben or regular verbs. That is, we'll be learning the conjugations of some basic, some regular verbs. So let's take an example here. Let's start with the word common. The meaning of the verb common is to come from somewhere. Okay, so if I am coming from a country, if I am coming from the cinema hall, for example, the verb I will use here is common. So common is a regular verb. Now, if you look at any verb that we have, a verb is divided into two parts. You will find all verbs in German will end with en. This en that we have is called as the endo, which is the ending of the verb. So in its original form, in the basic form, a verb will have en ending. What comes before that en? It doesn't matter how long or short your verb is. Whatever falls behind this en, okay, that is still here. This part is called as a stem. Now this is the very basic to understand how to conjugate a verb. Knowing what is the stem and what is the ending just makes your conjugation a little bit simpler. So this part, com, is your stem, which is the stem of the verb, okay? And this part, en, which is your endo, that is the ending of the verb. So if you look at the verb, you have en, which is the endo, and you have the com, whatever falls behind that verb. You have com, whatever falls behind that verb, as the stem. Now, when we conjugate regelmäßige Verben, or that is regular verbs, you conjugate it first on the basis of the pronouns we have learned previously. We first write down the pronouns. Your first person pronoun, ich. Your second person informal pronoun, du. Your third person masculine, feminine, sie, and neutral, s. And then your formal sie, that is second person formal. After that, we go to the plural forms. First person, wir. Second person, plural, ihr. Third person, sie. So this is your sie plural. And then this is again your formal plural. I'll brush up these, I'll just recap these pronouns once more. So ich is your first person, du is your second person informal, is your third person masculine, sie is your third person feminine, s is your third person neutral, this sie is your second person formal. First person plural is wir, second person plural informal is ihr, third person is sie plural, and then again sie formal plural. Now these 8 pronouns are the basis of our conjugation. So no matter what I am trying to say, it will never be outside of these 8. Okay? So all the verb conjugations happen according to these 8 pronouns. So whenever we choose our pronoun, we need to be sure that we are using the correct verb conjugation. What this means is that we are adjusting the verb correctly according to the pronouns. Okay. Now coming back to why this stem and this endo. Now what happens when we are conjugating regular verbs or regelmäßige Verben is that this stem that we have remains the same. So it does not matter if I'm conjugating ich, du, sie, wir, ihr, sie, or this sie. This com stays same for all the pronouns. So let us take a look at how to conjugate coming. So we write the conjugation as ich. We write the com here. Now what will change is this ending. So whenever you are conjugating regular verbs, the stem remains the same. What changes, however, is this ending. So for every pronoun, there is going to be a specific ending. So ich, your conjugation becomes comma. That is, with ich, the ending is e. So ich, comma. So when I want to say, yeah, I come from somewhere. Let's say I want to say I come from, I come from school. So in that case, that ich and the verb will be comma. So the verb originally is common, but because I am using it with ich, it will have this en. Then we come to the conjugation of du. in the form of a regular verb, the stem remains the same. The ending that do has is st. So that is st endo. So the conjugation here becomes do comest. So ish, comma, do comest. So let's say I am talking to a second person. Let's say I'm talking to my friend. Now I want to say that my second person do comes from somewhere. So in that case, the verb will change its form to comest. So the correct way is ish, comma, do comest. Now in the same context, we talk about a third person coming from somewhere. So we have our er, z or s, either one. So it could be third person masculine, it could be third person feminine, it could be third person neutral. The conjugation of a third person is not affected. So let's see there. The stem remains the same. The ending that we add to our third person is going to be T ending. So the conjugation here becomes RZS comst. Ish, comma, do comst, RZS comst. So here if I want to say a friend of mine is coming from school and this is an indirect reference, my conjugation or my verb will be comst. Now we move on to the Z formal, that is the zweite Person Z. So let's say if I want to say my boss is my second person in this scenario, he happens to be coming from somewhere. My stem remains the same, com, and in this case, my ending also remains the same. So Z common. So formal Z, the conjugation is going to be common. So ish, comma, do comst with st, here t, here there is no need to change anything. If my second person is formal, that is with the capital Z, it is going to be common. Let's move to the plural. Where, when we have where, stem remains the same. So where is who? My first person plus somebody along with me. So let's say I plus my family. So this becomes com. Ending will again remain the same. So with where, there is no change. So if I want to say, yeah, we all come from somewhere. Okay, we all, let's say, went to a restaurant and we are coming back from the restaurant. So when I say I come from that restaurant along with my family, it becomes plural. It becomes a whole group. So we, that is where, conjugation here becomes common. Next, we move on to the ear. That is when your second person is more than one. So if I want to say, I am the first person, I am having two people in front of me who happen to be my second person. Now, I want to say that these two, let's say friends of mine, they happen to come from somewhere. So I am using the same verb, but my pronoun now is ear. So with ear, with common, the stem remains the same. What changes here again is the ending, and the ending here is T. So ear, the ending is also comst. So where, common, no change, ear, comst. That is second person, ending is T. We move on to the third person. Plural, that is your Z plural. So let's say I'm talking about a group of people as third persons. They happen to come from somewhere. So here the conjugation for Z plural, is Z. The stem remains the same. In this case, the ending also remains the same. So there is no change here. Z common. Okay. And lastly, we come to second person formal. That is when I am talking to two of my bosses. It doesn't matter if it is singular or plural. Even in terms of the conjugation, it will remain the same. So the conjugation here remains common. So if you look at it, I talk to a second person, one boss, still same conjugation. I talk to two bosses as second person, formal with respect, the conjugation still remains the same. So we will repeat this whole conjugation. Ich komme, du kommst, sie es kommt, sie kommen, wir kommen, ihr kommt, sie kommen, sie kommen. Now let's take one more example under the regelmäßige Verben category, that is another regular verb, which is a basic verb, trinken. The meaning of trinken is to drink something. So let's just say you want to say you are drinking water or you're drinking coffee. The verb that we use for that is trinken. So it falls in the same category of regular verb. So like we have seen, only this ending is what we need to change. The rest of the part will remain the same. So your conjugation will become Ich trinke, du trinkst, sie es trinkt, sie formell trinken, wir trinken, ihr trinkt, sie trinken, sie trinken. If you look at it, it doesn't matter what verb it is, as long as it falls under the category of regelmäßige Verben or regular verbs, the conjugations are usually uniform. So regelmäßige Verben follow a fixed pattern. That is, once you know a verb is regular, the conjugation and the use of that verb is not difficult. The conjugation will follow this same pattern with ish having this ending, e ending, with ish having a ending, that is e ending, du with st ending, rs with t ending, sie no change, wir no change, ihr again with t ending, and this z with t ending. Okay, so now we have a small exercise for you all. What you all can do is, the verbs that you see on the screen, you can try conjugating them yourself the way we did it. So the first verb here is hören, which means to listen. So if you're listening to music, you're listening to something, that is to hear. We have machen. Machen is to make or to do something. So if you're making a coffee, you're making a cake, that is, the word will be machen. Gehen means to go someplace. If you're going somewhere, the word we use is gehen. Spielen is to play. So you can say cricket spielen or tennis spielen, which is you're playing something. So the verb is spielen. Kochen is to cook. So if you're cooking something, that is kochen. Kaufen is to buy or to purchase something. So when you're buying something, the verb is kaufen. All of the verbs that you see here, they fall under the category of regelmäßige Verben or regular verbs. You conjugate in the exact similar manner as the previous two verbs. So you can just try this out for your own practice. Now, we have some more regular verbs that we will be learning now. But these verbs have a little bit of a difference when it comes to the conjugation as compared to the previous verbs that we saw. So this is a bit like a subcategory to your regular verbs or your regelmäßige Verben, where your stem ends with certain specific syllables. These syllables are the sound of s, which is s, sound of t, which is t, and sound of de, which is d. Whenever we have verbs where the stem ends with either of these syllables, there is going to be a slight difference in their conjugation. Overall, they will be conjugated in a similar manner. There's not going to be a complete difference from the previous verbs that we have seen, but just minute change that you need to take into consideration while conjugating these verbs. So let's first start with stem ended mid S. That is when your stem ends with the syllable S, which is S. So the verb that we see here on the screen is the verb risen. Risen means to travel. So when we conjugate this verb, for each, there is no change. So we conjugate it like we have learned. Stem remains the same. We add E to it. But when we conjugate do here, stem remains the same. What we learned in the previous section when we conjugated regelmäßige Verben is we tend to add ST for a do conjugation. But when the stem already consists of this S, there is no need for this second S. So we can simply add T to our conjugation for do and get our conjugation for do. So we can simply add T to the conjugation for do. This S that we add for all the other verbs is not needed. So your conjugation for do becomes do reist. So ich reise with Endung, du reist here with Endung. Why? Because this S is already there. So there is no need to add another S to it. The remaining conjugations remain the same. So there is no change here. So RZS becomes reist, Sie reisen, wir reisen, ihr reist, Sie reisen, and Sie reisen. So remember, when your stem ends with S, there is no need for you to add another S to this do conjugation. You can simply add T to it and your conjugation will be correct. If you add double ST, then it may go wrong. So I'll give you all some more verbs here that you can practice on your own. The verb here is heißen, which is to be, where again you have the sound of S present, that is your S set. So S set also sounds like sir. Okay, so S set also sounds like sir. So what you do here is you simply add T to the conjugation. So you can just practice this verb and you will see that the conjugation is similar to this verb. The next category that we go on to now is stem ends with T. Okay, so let's take a verb where you will have your stem that ends with T. So the verb that we take here is the verb antworten. Antworten is to answer. So if somebody asks you a question, the reply that you give, that is called as the verb antworten. Now the stem here ends with T. Again, when it comes to the conjugation of verbs like this, there is a slight change that we need to take into consideration. Ich, we conjugate it as we have learned previously, no change. So it becomes ich antworte. When we conjugate do, the stem remains the same. What you do here is instead of adding ST, we add EST. So your conjugation becomes du antwortest. This is a grammar rule that needs to be followed. So whenever you are conjugating verbs with the stem ends with T, the do conjugation will have EST as the ending. The same also applies to RZS. So the stem remains the same here. And you add ET. So there is this extra E that gets added here and here. Z, there is no change. So here, same conjugation. Sie antworten, wir antworten. Here again that E will be added, so the conjugation becomes ihr antwortet, et. Okay. Sie antworten and sie antworten. So the correct use of the verbs where stem ends with T is by adding this E to the conjugations of do, yes, and ear. Now the last category that we have is when the stem ends with the letter D. I think, okay. The next category is where the stem ends with the letter D. So let's take another verb here where the stem ends with D. Okay. The verb that we have here is finden, which means to find. So when the stem ends with D, the exact rule that we follow for T is followed. So you again add est and et to the said conjugations of do, to the said conjugations of do, yes, and ear. So the conjugation becomes ich finde, du findest with est. Okay, yes, findet. Okay, yes, findet. Okay, then sie, there is no change. Sie finden, wir finden. Here again, that et will be added, that is findet. Okay, sie finden, sie finden. So when you conjugate the word finden, which means to find something, the stem here is D. So you add est and et to the do conjugation. You add et to the yes and the ear conjugation. I'll give you all some verbs which you all can practice, which fall under the category of T and D. So the verb that you all can take here is arbeiten, which means to work. You can take the verb warten, which means to wait. So you see, for both these verbs, the stem ends with T. And another verb that you can take here is the verb reden, which means to talk. Okay, so these verbs will be conjugated in a similar manner like we did the previous verb, which was antworten, and this verb, which is finden. After the regular verbs, we come to the irregular verbs. As I had mentioned earlier, we come to the unregelmäßige Verben. So regular verbs have a fixed pattern in which they are conjugated. And although there are some subcategories, the conjugation more or less remains similar. Not when it comes to unregelmäßige Verben though, or irregular verbs. So irregular verbs are divided into 3 categories and the conjugation for each of this category is unique. So what we need to know is which verb falls under what category and then conjugate it accordingly. So now I will be giving you all some examples for irregular verbs, or as we call it in German, unregelmäßige Verben. So we start with category 1, which is the verb sehen. We can remember this verb from Auf Wiedersehen, back when we learnt bye. So Auf Wiedersehen, the sehen in that means to see. Now the conjugation of this verb is different. It cannot be conjugated like we have done the verbs in the previous category. So again we bring that stem and endung into consideration. The verb ends with en. So this en ending is definitely what is going to change according to what we have seen previously. So the ending part changes in the same manner for regelmäßige Verben and unregelmäßige Verben both. However, there is one more change which will happen, and that will happen in the stem. So you can see this E in the stem. For the verb sehen, this E will change to IE. So this is category 1, where you have irregular verbs which are conjugated in this fashion. The one thing here that we need to remember is, although we are going to change this stem to IE, that is, although we are going to change this E in the stem to IE, we do not do it for the entire conjugation. We only change this at 2 places, that is for do and as yes. The rest of the conjugation stays unaffected, that is, the stem for the rest of the conjugation remains the same. So let's take a look. So, ish becomes ish sehe. Okay, let's do the rest of the conjugation and come to do and er sehes. Sie sehen, wir sehen, ihr becomes seht, sie sehen, sie sehen. So if you look at the rest of the conjugation, this is absolutely similar to what we have learned so far. So even though we say that yes, the verb is irregular, the rest of this conjugation has no effect. The only place where we have to change this E to IE is for these 2 places. So do, the conjugation becomes siehst. That ST ending is still added, but here the stem changes to Z. So, ich sehe, du siehst. Er siehst, that is for the third person, the same thing will happen. This will change to IE, and the ending that we add for er siehst is ste. So, your final conjugation becomes ich sehe, du siehst. Er sie sieht, sie sehen, wir sehen, ihr seht, sie sehen, sie sehen. So let's take an example. We saw that the verb sehen means to see something. So let's say you're talking about seeing a movie. So when I say this as a first person, I will use ich sehe. But let's say I have a second person whom I am talking to, happens to be a friend of mine. So I address this friend as du. Now when this friend watches a movie, the conjugation becomes siehst. When we talk about a third person watching that same movie, let's say we both have a friend and we refer to this friend indirectly now. So this becomes sieht. Okay? Or sies collectively, doesn't matter what the gender of the third person is, the conjugation still remains sieht. Sie sehen, no change, second person, formal. Wir sehen, no change, first person, plural. Ihr seht, second person, plural, informal. Sie plural is sehen. Sie formal plural again is sehen. So when it comes to irregular verbs, remember, the change in this stem of the verb will happen only at these 2 places. The rest of the conjugation, you can follow the same method that we have learned previously. It's just for these 2 places, be aware of what that change is gonna be. Another thing to keep in mind here is this one change does not apply to all the verbs. So every verb will be conjugated in a different form and it will be falling in this category. So sehen is conjugated with change in the stem, that is change in the A to I. Now we have some words which will fall in a different category. So let's take a look at them. So now we have 2 more verbs that we can see here. The first verb that we have here is sprechen. The second verb that we have here is geben. Sprechen is to speak. So when you say you speak a language, the verb that we have here is sprechen. Geben is to give something. So let's say I give you a pen. The verb that I will use in this case is geben. Now if you see, these verbs also have E in the stem. But they won't be conjugated like the previous verb that we saw. That's just a rule of grammar. So sprechen and geben, these two verbs form in the next category where the E in the stem will change to just I. So for sehen, the change was IE. For sprechen and geben, the change is just going to be I. Another thing to keep in mind again is it will only affect these two conjugations. It won't have an effect on the rest of the conjugation. So like the previous verb, let's just do the rest of the conjugation first and then go to do and RCS. The conjugation becomes Ich spreche, Sie sprechen, wir sprechen, ihr sprecht, ihr sprecht, sie sprechen, sie also sprechen. Now what happens to this E here in the stem? That E changes to I. So we have the conjugation as du sprichst. So this A changes to E. So ich spreche, du sprichst. That ST will still remain. So there is no change in the ending. There is only this I that we have to use. There is only this I that we have to use instead of the E. So du sprichst. The same change will happen for RCS. The conjugation here becomes spricht. So ich spreche, du sprichst, RCS spricht, sie sprechen, wir sprechen, ihr spricht, sie sprechen, and sie sprechen. Now, in a similar manner, we will conjugate the next verb, that is geben. So, these two verbs fall in the same category where E changes to I. So, we start with ich gebe, du becomes du gibst. Wherever you have E, that will change to I. So the position of the E in the verb may vary. It just needs to change to I wherever it is placed. So du conjugation becomes gibst. RCS becomes gibt. The rest of the conjugation, there is no change. So sie geben, wir geben, ihr gebt, sie geben, and sie geben. Okay, so let's look at it from point of view of an example. So sprechen is to speak. Let's look at it with the help of an example. So let's take the language Deutsch. So sprechen is to speak. When you speak a language, you use this word. So if I say as a first person, I can say ich spreche Deutsch. If I say that about the second person, then it becomes du sprichst Deutsch. Spricht Deutsch. Sie spricht Deutsch. Es spricht Deutsch. Sie sprechen, wir sprechen, ihr spricht, sie plural, sie formal sprechen, and Deutsch. So here, every time you refer to a different person, your word conjugation is changing. In addition to that, we also need to mark these changes that we are making to the conjugation. The same thing will apply to this verb. So let's say I talk of giving somebody something. If I give something myself, let's say I give a pen to somebody, this is done ich gebe. If somebody else, that is the second person, does that, it is du gibst. Third person will become gibt. So sie formell geben, wir geben, ihr gebt, sie geben. So the action remains the same. Depends on who is doing that, your verb conjugation will change. Okay? Yeah. And now let's go to the third category of verbs, where we have irregular verbs. Okay. And now let's go to the third category of verbs, which are irregular verbs, but they are still conjugated in a little bit different manner. So the verbs that we have here are we have two verbs here. The verb schlafen, which means to sleep, and the verb fallen, which means to fall. So when you're talking about how much you want to sleep, how long you sleep, the verb is schlafen. Fallen is, let's say somebody falls from somewhere, then it is fallen. Now if you see, the stem here has a. So the syllable or the vocal here that we have is a, which we will be changing. So this a will turn to a umlaut. That is, the sound of a in the conjugation becomes a. So let's take a look. So this becomes ich schlafe. The rest of the conjugation, as we have seen, remains the same. So sie schlafen, wir schlafen, ihr schlaft, ihr schlaft, sie schlafen, sie schlafen. Now we come to the conjugation of do and rs. So the a here in the verb will be replaced. The a here in the verb will be replaced by a. So the conjugation becomes du. The conjugation becomes du schläfst. RCS, the conjugation becomes schläft. So ich schlafe, du schläfst. Ich schlafe, du schläfst. RCS schläft. Sie schlafen, wir schlafen, ihr schlaft, sie schlafen. Now similarly, the conjugation of fallen will also have a umlaut at du and rs. So the conjugation becomes ich falle, du will become fällst with a umlaut, and du fällst. RCS will become fällt. Okay, and then the remaining conjugation, there won't be any change. So this will be sie fallen, wir fallen, ihr fallt, sie fallen, and sie fallen. So this is the third category for irregular verbs, where in the first category, the stem changed from E to IE. In the second, it changed from E to I. And in the third one, it changes from A to A umlaut. That is, the sound changes from A to A. So our last category now for irregular verbs are two verbs, as you can see, sein and haben. These verbs are also considered unique in themselves. The conjugation of these verbs isn't really similar to any other verb that we have done so far, but these two verbs are most commonly used in day-to-day communication. So the first verb that we have here is sein. Sein means to be something. It's on the lines of how we say I am something, you are something, or he or she is something. So sein has that meaning where you are trying to describe either someone or something. So the conjugation of sein is ich bin. So it's something when I say I am this. So ich bin, du bist, sie es ist, sie sind, wir sind, ihr seid, sie sind, and sie sind. So if you look at the conjugation is totally unique where the verb sein is nowhere used in the conjugation. So that's how this verb is conjugated. To give you an example, when I would like to say my name, I can use ich bin. Or when I am trying to say this is something, in that case I can say sie es ist. So it is just a description that is given of a first person or a second person. That is where I say yeah, to be something. Okay. So it's just the description that you give of the first person, second person, third person, first person plural, second person plural, and so on. When you are trying to describe that person or that thing, that is, it's equivalent to saying yeah, I am this, you are this, or he or she is that. So it follows that line where you take the appropriate pronoun and give it the appropriate conjugation to say yeah, this can be described with the help of the verb sein. Now the next verb we have here with sein is haben. So that's how we make a distinction. Sein is to be something, haben is to have something or to possess something. So the conjugation of the verb haben goes as ich habe, du hast, sie es hat, sie haben, wir haben, ihr habt, sie haben, and sie haben. So again, that's how you make a distinction. Either you are something that is given with sein, or you have something that is given with haben. So let's say you can have a family, you can have friends, you can have a phone or laptop. All of that you possess, that is haben. All of it that you can be, that is sein. So previously we have learned how the conjugations of the verbs work. That is how we adjust a verb pertaining to each pronoun that we are using. So now we will be looking at how to form sentences or how to make Sätze, as we call it in Deutsch. So we will be learning how to make sentences, and in Deutsch, sentences are called as Sätze. So this is the plural form. Singular is der Satz. Okay, and plural is the Sätze. So when it comes to sentence formation, your verb plays a very important role, and your verb is always going to take the second position. So remember, whenever you all are forming sentences, verb position is going to be zwei. This is something that cannot change in a sentence. It doesn't matter what your sentence starts with, doesn't matter what your sentence ends with, but your verb is always going to be at position zwei. In addition to being at position zwei, another thing we need to keep in mind when we talk about verbs in sentences is the conjugation. So there won't be any special instructions here, or nobody is ever going to come up to you in a conversation and tell you separately, oh, please conjugate the verbs that you are using. This is something which goes automatically whenever I am trying to speak in Deutsch. We think in such a way that the sentence structure is taken into consideration. So one thing we need to remember is putting your verb at position 2, no matter what? And secondly, conjugating that verb properly, that is adjusting that verb properly. So we will take a look at some examples here using the verbs we have previously learned. So we have learned the verb trinken, which is to drink. So if I make a sentence for a first person, my sentence will start with ish, because let's say I am giving information about the first person, which is I. Ish, conjugation of trinken is ish trinka. And then it can be followed by whatever it is that I am drinking. So let's just make it simple. Yeah, so let's just say ish trinka Wasser. So if you look at it, once you have your pronoun, that is your first person, second person, so on, you have your verb, you can complete the sentence by the rest of the information that remains. The same sentence can be made with do. So say for example, du trinkst Wasser. Okay, the same sentence, but I am using it for a second person. So the entire conjugation that you have learned can be used in such a manner to make complete sentences. If I want to say Paul, that is my third person masculine, so to say er. So this becomes er trinkt Wasser. Okay, so if you look at how the sentence goes, my verb is not changing its place. My verb at all places is position 2. If I happen to change this position a little bit, my sentence goes grammatically wrong. So, ich trinke Wasser, conjugated verb position 2. Du trinkst Wasser, conjugated verb again at position 2. Er trinkt Wasser, conjugated verb again at position 2. These are the basic sentences that we make in Deutsch, which you will be needing day in and day out, just to describe what is it that you are doing. So, basic actions, depending on the words that we have. Okay, so now let's take an example with the plural pronouns using the verb spielen, which means to play. So let's just say ish is the first person, that is when I play alone, I will use ish. But now let's say I am not alone. Okay, we use the noun Paul. So I have a friend named Paul. Und is and. So when you're combining two things, you use und. Paul und ich. Now we see that ich is not alone. Ich is accompanied by another person. So Paul und ich, this becomes your wir. So the conjugation for this is spielen. Paul und ich spielen Fußball. So if you see, the conjugation changes here to spielen. Why? Because your first person is no longer singular. Now many of you might wonder and say, okay, but the verb looks here to be at position 3, right? 1, 2, 3, actually not even 3, 4. So when we say position 2, that's not how position 2 works. When we say position 2, we are not really counting words and deciding, okay, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. No. When we make a sentence is made up of different parts. So if you look at it, this becomes part 1. So this entire Paul und ich takes your position 1. And your verb still remains at position 2. So Paul und ich spielen Fußball. Here, this entirely is the first place and your verb still remains here at second place. So whenever we make basic sentences, this verb will always take position 2. You just need to be observant of what your position 1 is. So your position 1 can be one word, it can be 2 words, it can be more information, doesn't matter. As long as it is collectively making sense together, it comes at position 1. Rest, the verb remains where it is. Now, after where, we have learnt ear. So when I say ear, conjugation of spielen is spielt. So ear, spielt, Fußball. So this is when, let's say, I am talking to two friends. I am the first person. I am not playing, but I am just saying, okay, these two are playing. So my second person is ear. Conjugation for ear is spielt. So this becomes ear, spielt, Fußball. So another verb that we can take that we have learned so far is the verb schlafen. Now this verb means to sleep, okay, and it is an irregular verb. So let me take an example for ich. So ich, conjugation is schlafe. Let's say I want to say I sleep long. So I use the word lang, which means long in Deutsch. So ich schlafe lang. So if you see here again, my pronoun has changed to ich and I have the word ich. I have the verb conjugation for ich. Now the same thing if I want to write for for example, or sie. So let's take a noun here, Paula, which stands for third person sie. So here it becomes Paula schläft lang. Okay, so this becomes your first position. I am referring to Paula indirectly, so this becomes sie. Your verb still stays at position 2, that does not move, and the conjugation changes for third person. So all the verbs that we have learned, you can use it in sentences in a similar manner. Determine what pronoun you want to use with it, and then at position 2, conjugate your verb correctly, and the rest of the sentence will be completed in whatever context it is being used. So now next we will be learning how to introduce ourselves in Deutsch. Self-introduction in Deutsch is called as sich vorstellen. A lot of times you are in situations, let's say you are at an interview, you are in an exam, or in general if you meet somebody new, they often expect you to introduce yourself, especially when you are in Germany and you say that yes, you are learning the language, they expect your introduction to be in the same language. So we have some key pointers on which you can introduce yourself, either in the form of a question or an answer, or plainly in the form of statements. There are some basic pointers based on which you can introduce yourself in the form of a question and an answer. That is, if somebody asks you a question, you can respond to it. A lot of times the self-introduction is directly in the form of statements where somebody asks you to introduce yourself and one by one you just give your introduction. So we will start with the first point, which is pretty basic, pretty self-explanatory, that is your name. In any introduction, the first place will be always taken by your name. If you see, the spelling does look similar to what we have in English, but the pronunciation here is going to be different. In Deutsch, we pronounce this as Name. Okay, so your name is called Name. So this is the first point of introduction that we have, where we will be learning how to ask somebody their name in the form of a question and how to respond if we get to ask that question. So the first variation that we do here is the formal variation, is wie ist Ihr Name. Okay. So this is a formal variation in which you ask somebody their name. If you notice, I have written this N in capital. Another thing you need to know about German nouns is that the first letter of every noun in German is always written in capitals. So we do not write the name in small letters. The first letter will The first letter will stay capital regardless of where it comes in a statement or in a question. It could be right at the beginning, right at the end, in the middle, it doesn't matter. It is always going to be capital. So this is a formal variation, a formal question, okay? If you remember, we've already spoken about formal and informal conversations. So this is a formal question if you're asking somebody in a very official setup. Wie ist Ihr Name? The answer to that becomes Mein Name ist, and it can be followed by your name. So for example, let's take the name Anna over here. Okay, so if I am talking to a colleague, I ask the question, Wie ist Ihr Name? To which I get a response, Mein Name ist Anna. Okay, I'll repeat this once more. Wie ist Ihr Name? Mein Name ist Anna. The informal way of asking this same question is Wie ist dein Name? Okay, Wie ist dein Name? The response remains the same. That is, Mein Name ist Anna. So every question you have, there are always going to be two ways to ask. One formal, one informal. So this is Wie ist dein Name? Mein Name ist Anna. This is just one way of asking somebody their name. We have one more example or one more way in which we can ask somebody their name. Let's take a look at that. Okay. So the question is, Wie heißen Sie? So if you look at the Z, this Z is the formal Z, the capital Z, which we have been using. Wie heißen Sie? Heißen is to be. So Wie heißen Sie? The answer to that becomes, Ich heiße Anna. You can also use the verb sein here and say, Ich bin Anna. Okay, so Wie heißen Sie? This is the formal question. We have an informal variation of it too, which becomes Wie heißt du? Ich heiße Anna. So these are the two questions with which you can ask somebody their name and also respond in this manner if you are asked these questions. So the next point of introduction that we have is Alter, which means age. So in the second introduction point, you are expected to be asked your age and respond to the same question. Okay, so again we will have two variations here, one formal, one informal. So the formal question is Wie alt sind Sie? The same question can be asked informally in the form of Wie alt bist du? This basically means how old you are. So you're asking this question formally as well as informally. The answer to that becomes Ich bin, whatever your age is. So let's say you're 25 years of age. You will say Ich bin 25 Jahre alt. That is, you are 25 years old. So when we write numbers, we can write it in the numerical forms. We do not need it in words. But when we speak it out, it is going to be 25, like we had learned. The number goes backwards like this. So Wie alt sind Sie? Or Wie alt bist du? Ich bin 25 Jahre alt. This is your second point of introduction. Our third point of introduction is Land, which means country. So what you're trying to ask the person here is what is their country of origin or where do they come from. So when you are in Germany, you are often asked this question to just know which country you come from. So Country in Deutsch is called as Land. The question that we have here is woher kommen Sie? If you see, the verb that we are using here is kommen, which we have previously seen. That is, kommen is to come. So you are asking here woher kommen Sie, as in where do you come from? So this is your formal question. Your informal question here becomes woher kommst du? You're keeping the verb the same, but you are conjugating it according to formal and informal. So woher kommen Sie? Woher kommst du? If you come from India, let's just say your country of origin is India. So we say, so if your country of origin is India, we will say ich komme aus Indien. So the country India in German is called as Indian. This does not mean I'm saying a nationality here. The country itself is called as Indian. So we say Germany in English, but in German we say Deutschland. Similarly, we say India in English, but in Deutsch, in German, we will say Indian. So the question is woher kommen Sie? This is your formal question. Or woher kommst du? This is your informal question. The response to that becomes ich komme aus Indien. Okay. The next pointer to our introduction is Wohnort, which means the place where you live. So the question will be wo wohnen Sie? Now this is a new verb that we see here. The verb is wohnen. So the question we have here is wo wohnen Sie? If you look at the verb wohnen, wohnen means to live. And if you look at the pronunciation of it, this ha is pronounced very subtly. So whenever you have the sound of ha in Deutsch, the pronunciation is very subtler. We do not stress on that ha a whole lot. So it shouldn't sound like wohnen. It sounds like wohnen. It's subtle, it's smooth. So wo wohnen Sie? It's a regular verb, so it can be conjugated like the rest of the regular verbs that we have learned. The informal question therefore becomes wo wohnst du? So the question is wo wohnen Sie or wo wohnst du? The answer to that becomes ich wohne in Dresden. Okay, so here you can use the name of any city that you live in. The question will remain the same. This is wo wohnen Sie, formal. Informal is wo wohnst du. The response to that becomes ich wohne in Dresden. Our next point of introduction is going to be Sprachen, which are the languages that you speak. So the question for that we have is welche Sprachen sprechen Sie? Okay, so what you're asking here is which languages do you speak? You see the Z is capital here, so this is your formal Z. Now we turn the same question into an informal question. We have learned the conjugation of sprechen. So the question becomes welche Sprachen sprichst du? So one question that you have is a formal question, welche Sprachen sprechen Sie? The next question that you have here is an informal question, that is welche Sprachen sprichst du? Here you can include as many languages as you speak. So we will just take two languages for example here. So let's say the answer becomes ich spreche Englisch und Deutsch. Okay, So, ich spreche English. If you see, the spelling of English is a little different, so is the pronunciation. So, English in Deutsch, that is English in German, is called as English. So, ich spreche English und Deutsch. This und is and, which combines these two parts together. So, ich spreche English und Deutsch. Now, there is another thing that you can add here. Let's say you are a beginner, you have just started learning Deutsch. And when you say ich spreche Deutsch, the opposite person just expects that you know Deutsch and they will start talking very fast. So here you can indicate to the other person that you are a beginner by adding the word etwas. So I can say ich spreche English und etwas Deutsch. What this means is I talk a bit of Deutsch. So you can very well skip this if you don't need it, but you can use it if you feel like you need to indicate to the other person that yeah, you're a beginner and you're just starting out. So we'll repeat this. Welche Sprachen sprechen Sie? Welche Sprachen sprichst du? Ich spreche Englisch und Deutsch. Or you can say, ich spreche Englisch und etwas Deutsch. Our next point of introduction is Beruf, which means profession. So you can cover your profession in your self-introduction. The question for that is, was sind Sie von Beruf? This is you asking the opposite person, what are you by profession, or what is your profession? Or we can make an informal question with it, that is, was bist du von Beruf? So you are asking this question formally with the, informally with du. So here you can state your profession if you are a student. So you can answer this by saying, ich bin Student. Or if you are a woman or a girl, you can answer this by saying, ich bin Studentin. As we know, all nouns have genders. Same thing goes for professions in Deutsch. That is, if you are a man in that profession, there is one word for it. If you are a woman in the same profession, there is another word for it. So if you are a student and you happen to be a guy, it is ich bin Student. If you happen to be a girl, for the same profession, that is, you both are students, but here the word becomes Studentin. So remember, masculine, der Student, feminine, die Studentin. You can skip the article when you are using professions. So let's repeat this once. Was sind Sie von Beruf? Or was bist du von Beruf? Ich bin Student. Or ich bin Studentin. And our final point of introduction is hobbies. So the question for that is, was sind Ihre Hobbies? Or was sind deine Hobbies? Here, you are simply asking the person what their hobbies are. The answers here can be diverse. So, whatever verbs you have learned, you can use them as hobbies. Say, traveling is a hobby, playing is a hobby. Okay, so whatever hobbies you have, you can either use one hobby or you can use multiple hobbies. So, let's take a few for example. So, the response here can be, meine Hobbys sind Reisen, that is to travel, und Fußball spielen. Okay, so these are the two hobbies that we have mentioned here. That is, you say, yeah, your hobbies are traveling and playing football. So we will repeat this once more. Was sind Ihre Hobbys? Or was sind deine Hobbys? Meine Hobbys sind Reisen und Fußball spielen. These are the pointers that you can use to introduce yourself. So this is how you will introduce yourself when somebody asks you for your introduction. Not always is it going to be a dialogue. Let's say you go for an exam or you go for an interview and your examiner or your interviewer just asks you to introduce yourself. So this is how your introduction will start. You start with Ich bin Anna, for example. Ich bin Anna. Ich bin 25 Jahre alt. Ich komme aus Indien. Ich wohne in Dresden. Ich spreche Englisch und Deutsch. Ich bin Studentin. Meine Hobbys sind Reisen und Fußball spielen. So this much can count for your self-introduction at both of these places in an exam or in an interview. Hi, now we will be learning some basic nouns pertaining to food and drinks. So what I have here for you are some basic nouns pertaining to food which we use day in and day out. So the first noun that we have is der Apfel. Apfel is a masculine noun and the article here is der. So der Apfel. The next noun that we have is der Käse. Käse means cheese. The third noun that we have here is the Milch, which is milk. Der Orangensaft, that is orange juice. Das Brot, that is bread. Das Wasser, that is water. We'll repeat these nouns. Der Apfel, der Käse, die Milch, der Orangensaft, das Brot, das Wasser. We have some more nouns now. Das Bier, that is beer. Der Wein, das Hähnchen, der Wurst, which is a sausage, das Fleisch, and der Fish. So beer is beer, wine means wine. So the words here are pretty simple, pretty similar. Das Hähnchen is chicken. Der Wurst is a sausage. Das Fleisch is meat. Und der Fisch is fish. So whenever you are at a restaurant, make sure you know the meats that you are ordering. Whenever you are at a breakfast table, there are some questions which are very common. So we can see them here. So breakfast is das Frühstück. I'll repeat it. Das Frühstück. The first question that we have here is Was essen Sie zum Frühstück? Which means what do you eat for breakfast? So the question here has Sie in it, which means it is a formal question. We can have the same question made informally, which says Was isst du zum Frühstück? The meaning of the question remains the same. It's just the informal way of asking the same question. The answer to that can be Ich esse Brot mit Butter zum Frühstück. But of course, you can say whatever you are eating and mention there. So if you are eating a sandwich, you can say Ich esse Sandwich. The next question is Was trinken Sie zum Frühstück? The question is asking what do you drink for breakfast? Again with the Sie, it is a formal question. The same question can be formed informally with the correct conjugation of trinken, which is trinkst, and adding the du. So the question is, Was trinkst du zum Frühstück? The answer to that is, Ich trinke Kaffee mit Milch zum Frühstück. Kaffee mit Milch is coffee with milk. So what you are saying here is you drink coffee with milk for breakfast. After breakfast now comes lunch. So lunch is das Mittagessen. Okay. The question is, was essen Sie zum Mittagessen? Oder was essen Sie zu Mittag? So there are two ways in which you can ask this question. Either use zum Mittagessen or zu Mittag. The difference between both these questions is zum Mittagessen is specifically asking what do you have for lunch. Was essen Sie zu Mittag is just asking what did you have at noon. We have a same way in which we can form this question informally with was isst du zum Mittagessen or was isst du zu Mittag. The answer to that is ich esse Wurst mit Gemüse zum Mittagessen, or you can have the same statement with ich esse Wurst mit Gemüse zu Mittag. So Wurst is sausage, which is apparently a very famous food in Germany. So you can definitely try out currywurst with pommes, which means curry sausage with French fries. Now the next meal we have is dinner. So dinner is das Abendessen. Okay. We have a similar question that we can frame for dinner as well. So the question says, was essen Sie zum Abendessen? So you just replace the Mittagessen with Abendessen. Was essen Sie zum Abendessen? Or was essen Sie zu Abend? Which means you are asking, what is the person having for dinner? The same question can also be made informally. Was isst du zum Mittagessen? Or was isst du zu Mittag? So the response to that can be ich esse Döner zum Abendessen or ich esse Döner zu Abend. So Döner is again a very popular food in Germany that you can try. And lastly, let's take a situation. So let's just say you are sitting at a restaurant. Knowing some basic things will help the process of ordering in a restaurant a little bit easier. So the first question we have here is, was möchten Sie trinken? Which means, what would you like to drink? So you can place your order by saying, ich möchte Kaffee bitte. So if you want to order a coffee, you can use the word Kaffee and say, ich möchte Kaffee bitte. The next question that we have here is, bestellen Sie etwas zum Essen? So the word bestellen means to order. So this is normally a question that gets asked in restaurants where the server asks you if you would like to order something to eat. So the word here is bestellen. Make sure you remember this. Bestellen can also be used in context of ordering food deliveries. So the question is, bestellen Sie etwas zum Essen? The response is ja gern, that is yes, I would like to. Ich möchte eine Tomatensuppe bitte. So for example, if you would like to order a tomato soup, you can respond saying ich möchte eine Tomatensuppe bitte, which means I would like to order a tomato soup. You can see at the end of every statement, we have added a bitte, which means please, in order to make your order or your statement a little bit polite. So when you add bitte, it shows that you're not being rude and you are requesting your server to bring something for you. The final question that you can see here is, die Rechnung ist 15 Euro. So Rechnung is a bill. So the last part is when you get your bill, the question is, bezahlen Sie zusammen oder getrennt? So you can see the word bezahlen here. Bezahlen means to pay. So when you make a payment for something, the verb that we use is bezahlen. And it's a very common question, is zusammen oder getrennt? So when you go out with a group of people, you always have the option to split your bill. So when you say that you would like to pay zusammen, okay, so the word zusammen means together. That is, they will just give you one bill and you pay the whole amount together. Getrennt is when everybody pays for themselves separately. So you can answer whatever is convenient to you. So here in the example, we have said zusammen, that is, we will pay the bill together, and you can finally end this conversation with a danke, that is a thank you. Now the situation that we look at is the situation at the airport. Airport is Flughafen. Okay, so the situation we have is am Flughafen, which is on the airport or at the airport. The first word we take here is the Immigration, which means immigration, or the Einwanderung, which means immigration as well. So the Immigration or the Einwanderung. These two terms we use for immigration. But when you are at an airport and you have to get your passports checked, the word that is used is the Passkontrolle, which means passport check. So as you can see, der Reisepass or their pass means passport, and Kontrolle is checking of that passport. So the word we use here, which you might see at airports, is the Passkontrolle, where you get your immigration stamp. Another word that we very commonly see at airports is der Zoll. Zoll means customs. Okay, so keep an eye out at these boards whenever you are at the airport. The next word that we take here is the word der Flug, which means a flight. So the word is der Flug. So when we talk of flights, we have the word der Abflug, which means departure. So when you are looking at flights departing at an airport, make sure you look for the word Abflug or sometimes only Ab in short form. This represents departures. The next word that we take here is the word die Ankunft, which means arrivals. So whenever you are looking at flights arriving, the word that is used is der Ankunft, sometimes written in short with an dot, which is Ankunft. So this is departures and this is arrivals. Now let's take a look at some common questions that you might encounter at an airport. The first very basic question is wie ist Ihr Name? So you need to respond here with your name. So for example, mein Name is Antonio Bach. The next question that follows might be woher kommen Sie? That is, they would like to know where are you coming from. So the response to that can be the country that you are coming from. So for example, ich komme aus Japan, which is Japan. It could be followed by a question asking you, was machen Sie in Deutschland? That is what you are doing here in Germany. So for example, you are traveling to a city. You can tell them that you are going to this city by using the verb reisen. So for example, the response here can be ich reise nach Dresden. If you are a student, you may often get a question that asks wo studieren Sie? That is the place where you are studying, which means you need to respond here with the name of your university. So when the question is wo studieren Sie, you can respond with ich studiere an der ABC University. So this ABC is basically a blank. You can put in the name of your university over here. Now after this, we take a look at some more basic modes of transportation that you can find. Transportation or transport is called as Verkehrsmittel, which means modes of transportation. So there are some common public transportation that we can see here. Das Taxi, which is a taxi. Das Auto, which is a car. Der Zug, which is a train. Der Bus, which is a bus. Und die Straßenbahn, which is a tram. I'll repeat these once more. Das Taxi, das Auto, der Zug, der Bus, die Straßenbahn. So now let's assume we are traveling somewhere and we are taking a train. So here is an example of a very basic dialogue that you can have at a railway station. Also, you will learn certain terms here which are very important when you are traveling by a train. So we start with the dialogue at the railway station. So let's just say you walk up to a ticket window. You greet the person sitting at the ticket window by saying Hallo, guten Tag. So when you walk up to a ticket window, you can greet the person sitting at the ticket window by saying Hallo, guten Tag. Okay? If it is morning, please say Guten Morgen. If it is evening, please say Guten Abend. So, for example, we have taken here Guten Tag. Let them know where you would like to go. Eine Fahrkarte nach Dresden bitte. So let's say we are traveling to Dresden. We need a ticket for Dresden. So we ask eine Fahrkarte nach Dresden. So a Fahrkarte is a ticket. If you see, we have added the word bitte here so that we sound polite. So eine Fahrkarte nach Dresden. You might get a response from the person at the ticket window asking when you would like to go. That is, which train you would like to board. So the question might often be, wann möchten Sie fahren? That is, when would you like to travel? So it's not always that you go to a ticket window and buy a ticket for immediate travel. You might also go in for a reservation. So that's the reason they ask you first, wann möchten Sie fahren? So you can inquire about when the next train leaves by asking, wann fährt der nächste Zug? So as we saw, Zug is a train. What you need to know here is when the next train is going. So the word next stands for next. You might get a response, for example, der nächste Zug fährt 10 Uhr am Gleis 4. Now what this means is, in response, that person might tell you that the next train is, for example, leaving at 10 o'clock, which is 10 Uhr am Gleis 4. So the word Gleis means platform. After that, you may want to know the cost of the ticket. So this is was kostet die Fahrkarte. Was kostet die Fahrkarte, meaning what is the cost of the ticket, to which you will definitely get a response from the person at the ticket counter asking einfach oder hin oder zurück. So when you are traveling one way means einfach. That is, you're only going in one direction. You might not want a return ticket immediately. But when you say hin und zurück, which means you need a two-way ticket, that is, you need a return ticket. So if you want a one-way ticket, just say einfach. If you need a return ticket, that is, if you're going and you are returning, in that case, ask for hin und zurück, which means you need a return from that place, a return ticket from that place. So for example, we have taken your einfach, which means just give me a one-way ticket. They will tell you the cost of the ticket. 35 Euro. This is just an example that I have taken, 35 euros. Hier bitte. They might just hand you the ticket. You can say danke and you can conclude the conversation. So let me give you this whole conversation again. Hallo, guten Tag. Eine Fahrkarte nach Dresden bitte. Wann möchten Sie fahren? Wann fährt der nächste Zug? Der nächste Zug fährt 10 Uhr am Gleis 4. Was kostet die Fahrkarte? Einfach oder hin und zurück? Einfach bitte. 35 Euro. Hier bitte. Danke. Remember the word Gleis, which means platform, Fahrkarte, which means a train ticket, or can be used for any other ticket that you use in any other mode of transport. And einfach oder hin und zurück, which means one way and return. Now in the next segment, we will be taking a look at bank related conversation and bank related words. Of course, going to the bank and knowing what needs to be done can be a little difficult, especially when you have to converse in the language that you are not aware of. So if you are in Germany and you need to go to a bank, here I have some basic words for you which might help you going about some basic business in a bank. So first, let's take a look at these words. The very basic word when we come to think of a bank is money. So the first word I have for you here is das Geld, which means money. In general, Geld means cash. So if you want to specify that, we have one more word which means Bargeld. So the bar here stands for cash. So das Geld is either money. Thus, Bargeld specifically can mean cash. Then you can see here, the word we have is the EC-Karte, which means an electronic card. So that EC, that E and C stands for electronic, which means your ATM or your debit card. Sometimes your ATM cum debit card. So whenever you are issued a card by a bank from which you can withdraw money from an ATM machine, that is your EC-Karte. Another form of card that we have is the Kreditkarte, that is a credit card. So understand the difference between these two. The EC-Karte is your ATM card. The Kreditkarte is your credit card. After this, we come to the word der Geldautomat. Der Geldautomat is your ATM machine. After that, we have the word the Geheimnummer, which is your PIN. So it could be your ATM PIN, it could be a credit card PIN. Whenever you are using the word PIN, the German word for it usually is the Geheimnummer, but we can make do by using the word PIN. So you can also use PIN, but a lot of times you have German employees in a bank, so they might use the word Geheimnummer if for any reason they might ask you for your PIN. So remember the word Geheimnummer. We'll repeat these words once. Das Geld, das Bargeld, die EC-Karte, die Kreditkarte, der Geldautomat, die Geheimnummer. Now, after having seen these basic words, I'll take you to some common terminologies that we use in banking. So the first term that we have here is das Konto eröffnen. Konto is an account, that is a bank account. Okay, any other account is also known as konto, but since we are learning words here specific to banking, a konto here stands for a bank account. And the word eröffnen means to open a bank account. So if you want to open a bank account, this is the term that you use, Konto eröffnen. After that, we have the word Geld einzahlen. Einzahlen is to deposit. So when you want to deposit money in your bank or in your bank account specifically, the word that we use here is einzahlen. So Geld is money. Einzahlen is basically to put in money in your bank account. After this, we have Geld abheben, which is the opposite of einzahlen, which means to withdraw money or take out money. So einzahlen is putting in money. Abheben is taking out money, which is withdrawing money. Next, we have the word the PIN. Like I told you, you don't always have to use the word Geheimnummer. You can use the word the PIN or the Geheimnummer eingeben. Eingeben is to punch in a number. So when you're operating an ATM screen, it might ask you PIN eingeben, which means they are asking you to punch your PIN in there. Kredit bekommen means to get a loan. So credit means credit, like it works in English also. To get a loan or to receive a credit is credit bekommen. Bekommen specifically means to receive something, and in this case you are receiving a credit, so it is credit bekommen. Now, the next couple of things are little important. Karte verloren. Verloren means to lose. So, unfortunately, if you happen to lose your bank card, that is your ATM card or your credit card, please use the word verloren. Okay? Karte verloren means to have lost your card. And in an action, what the bank will do? Karte sperren, which means they will block your card. So the word sperren means to block, and the word verloren means to have lost. So if you have lost a card, please say verloren. That is Karte oder Kreditkarte verloren and Karte sperren. That is, you can ask them to block your card. Last we see here is Geld überweisen. Geld überweisen is to transfer money. So let's say you are living in Germany, you may want to send money to your family living in some other part of the world. The word you use here is Geld überweisen, which means you wish to transfer money. It doesn't always have to be an international transfer, of course. You can transfer money within Germany, but money transfer is Geld überweisen. Or you can also use the noun, die Überweisung, which means transfer. So a lot of times when you fill forms, they can ask you preferences as to how would you like to receive money for something or how would you like to pay money for something. So in that case, if you wish to use a money transfer, please cross or select this item. Please select this word Geld überweisen or Überweisung, whatever is mentioned on your form. So after having learned some of these basic terminologies, let's take a look at an example in the form of a dialogue. Okay, so first we have the word here, der oder die Bankangestellte. So a person who works in a bank is called as Bankangestellte. When you talk of professions, usually you have a masculine noun for the man who works in that profession. So it becomes der Bankangestellte. You have another word for women who work in that profession. So it becomes die Bankangestellte. Now in this case, if you notice, the word Bankangestellte stays the same. What does change, however, is the article representing masculine or feminine. So, der Bankangestellte is a male employee in the bank. Die Bankangestellte is the female employee in the bank. Then we have the word der Bankkunde or die Bankkundin, which means a bank customer. So, the word der Kunde meaning customer is masculine, die Kundin meaning customer is feminine. Since these are customers pertaining to the bank, we use the word der Bankkunde or die Bankkundin. Okay, so if you would like to withdraw money, you can say, ich möchte mein Geld abheben. This is what we learned previously. Geld abheben means to withdraw money. This is how you can tell the teller or the cashier, whoever is there, saying, yeah, I would like to withdraw my money. So, ich möchte mein Geld abheben. To which they might ask you, was ist Ihre Kontonummer? Kontonummer is your account number. So, they might want to know here what your account number is, obviously. So you can respond to that by saying meine Kontonummer is in this case 0098 2007743. This is just an account number that I have taken for example. Here you can present them with your own account number and withdraw your money. Do not forget to end the conversation with Danke. If it so happens, unfortunately, that you have lost your bank card or your ATM card, you can tell them, Ich habe meine EC-Karte verloren. I'll repeat this. Ich habe meine EC-Karte verloren. That is, you have lost your bank card or your credit card. In case of the loss of credit card, you can just say, Ich habe meine Kreditkarte verloren. So instead of this EC-Karte, you replace it with Kreditkarte. You may get a response which says, dann muss ich Ihre EC-Karte sperren und eine neue bestellen. Which means I must now block this card and order another one for you. So, Ihre EC-Karte sperren. Sperren means they are telling that we will block this card or lock this card now. Und eine neue bestellen. So bestellen we have used in context of food as well when we talk of ordering food, and here we are using this word bestellen in terms of ordering another card. Now we will learn some basic words that are often used and seen in universities. So the first word that we have here is der Ausweis. Ausweis is an identity card. Now, in all contexts, an ID card is called as Ausweis. When you are in a university, der Ausweis means your university ID card. The next word that we have here is the Bibliothek. Bibliothek means library. After that, we come to the Mensa. A university canteen is called as Mensa. So, the word here is the Mensa. And the last word that we see here is das Klassenzimmer. Das Klassenzimmer means classroom. So we'll repeat these words once. Der Ausweis, which means ID card. The Bibliothek, which means library. The Mensa, which means university canteen. And das Klassenzimmer, which means classroom. We have some more words here related to university. We start with der Professor, which means a professor. As we have seen previously as well, when it comes to professions, there will always be two nouns for the same profession, one masculine, one feminine. So if you have a male professor, it will be der Professor. If you have a female professor, the word for that is die Professorin. So der Professor, die Professorin. Similarly, der Student, die Studentin. That means if you are a student, a guy, then der Student. If you are a student and a girl, then die Studentin. Then we come to the word the Fächer. Fächer are subjects. So whatever subjects you'll study at the university, all of them together are called as the Fächer. And the final word that we see here is the Bücher. Bücher are books. So we'll repeat these words once more. Der Professor, die Professorin, der Student, die Studentin, die Fächer, die Bücher.